my name is Cassie and I'm the creator of Pieces of Scrap, and in today's video we are going to be reviewing Theresa's Crochet Shop Amigurumi Plushies book. And the way that we're going to do this is I have each one of these plushies made and I am going to go through them one by one in this book, one at a time, tell you my thoughts about each one of these patterns, as well as rank them on a tier list. As you can see here, we have S tier through D tier, and I have each of the pattern photos ready to drag on screen when I'm talking about those patterns and placing them on the tier list. In addition to that, I have a list of how the patterns rank against each other when it comes to how much time they take to make versus how much yarn they take to make, and that'll give you a better idea of how much time you need to invest or how much yarn you need to invest in each one of these projects to determine if it's worth making in your own spare time. And I'm also really excited to share my overall thoughts about the book when we are finished talking about the individual patterns, and just letting you know, if I were to know ahead of time all it takes to make these projects, if I would invest my time and money into making any of these plushies in the future. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Pattern number 1 is Binx the plush bat. The pattern book itself has a few color variations of Binx, but I really wanted to do a solid black Binx just because I really wanted to show off some of these new safety eyes I've been selling in my shop. This is the color Pixie Dust 25mm safety eyes. I think they're really beautiful, and it really brings out all of the beautiful colors in the eyes when it's just one solid color as dark as this one. Some things that I really like about this pattern is how posable this little bat is. You can have his wings outstretched like this, or you can have them wrapped around his cute little body like this. He's also really bobbleheady, and I don't know if that's the intention in the design itself or if it's a stuffing flaw in my part, but it's a really cute pattern. Even though I followed the instructions for the pattern, I do notice that my head bobbles quite a bit, and I don't think that is what the intended design is supposed to be like. I feel like the fixed position of the head being just upright and looking alert is probably what is intended, but I'm not sure what I could have done. I could have stuffed the neck a little bit more perhaps, but there's not much else I could have done to make it look or sit any better in my opinion. Something I noticed about this pattern in particular, and quite a few other patterns in this book as well, is that this problem where the head is bobbly could have been eliminated if it was just made in one continuous piece, the body section and the head section together, and I don't see anything really preventing that for a handful of patterns featured in this book, just because the head hole and the body hole are the same size. You have the same amount of stitches. You could just work continuously into the body if you were to work backwards through the body section from the head section. So the head section to the body section continuously, you would just work the body section instructions backwards. And I think it would eliminate a lot of the head bobbliness that we're seeing here, and it would give it more structure, and I think it would be easier to stuff and assemble overall. I do wish that there were some sort of like pipe cleaners in the wings themselves so that when you have them posed, they just stay in their fixed location. When you have the wings and you're not touching them to pose them at all, they naturally want to fall back and just kind of float like this, which isn't bad, but I feel like most people would probably have this sat somewhere, and when you sit the wings, they just kind of flail apart like this, and I'm not a huge fan of what that looks like. I think they're cuter when they're like this, and I think if there was like some sort of pipe cleaner of some sort stuffed in the edging of this wing here, it would make it a little bit more posable, and you could fix it to a single pose and not have to worry about it falling out of that pose. So for Binx the Bat, it's kind of hard to start off with a tier list. I have actually never done a tier list either before, so this is definitely a first for me. But I think I would have to place Binx in maybe B tier. I think the pattern is really cute. He's really unique, and I don't think I've seen a bat pattern like this. I'm not sure if bats typically have arms and legs, not that that is something that is super required for a pattern like this, but I think it would add a little bit more realism to the pattern, but I don't know if that's the intention. I think it's meant to be a little bit more cutesy. I think the head itself reads a little bit like a cat and not as much as a bat, but I do know that that is a little bit more cutesy as well. But there are some drawbacks to this pattern that I've already mentioned, like the head being really bobbly, the wings not really sitting in the designated location that I want them to sit in. They're just kind of floppy. This pattern, all in all, is kind of floppy. It is really, really cute, and that is why I would put it in B tier. It's just kind of mid for me. I think this pattern could do with a little bit more work, and it would be faster to make and easier to make. It would be cuter overall, especially with the posability aspect, and I think I would just enjoy making it a little bit more if some of those things were implemented into the pattern. So that is why I would put it at B tier. The next pattern featured in this book is Burke the plush bee, really cute little bee here. In this plushie, I have another set of the safety eyes that I painted myself. This is the color Cobalt Treasure, and this color is really unique because on yellow plushies, I've noticed that it looks a little bit more green than it does blue, which is really cool because that's kind of what I intended. I wanted it to be like that one eye color that you see some people have, and in different lighting, it looks blue or it looks green, and that's really what I was going for here. I actually have never seen a bug amigurumi constructed this way. Typically, you see that really like ball shaped, maybe cylinder shaped bees, the really easy, everybody has their own mini bee pattern. You know what I'm talking about when I say that. But this one is really unique because of the effect of having like the pointed body here. We've got little arms as well as the wings are really pronounced, and I also love that he has his own little like eyebrows, smile, little rosy cheeks. He's really cute, and his face is something that really stands out with this pattern, so that's really cute and unique. I do think that just like the bat, the wings are a little bit floppy. I had to tack them in place pretty severely to make sure that they weren't flopping too much, so it's just up to preference, I think, but I wish that they would maybe like curve in a little more, and maybe they would just look a little bit nicer if that was the case. On the flip side, it is really flappy, the wings, and fun to interact with. So if you're thinking about making this for a little kiddo or something like that, that makes it a little bit more interactable, which could be a plus for you. Anyway, let's go ahead and put this pattern on the tier list. So this pattern is one that I'm kind of up in the air about as well. Maybe putting in the B tier just because it's cute, but it does take a lot of time to make. I didn't mention this, but this pattern takes nearly 2 hours to make, and it also takes about 3 ounces of yarn, which is a lot more than I expected for doing this type of pattern. There's also just some things about it that I'm not as much of a fan about, specifically all of the different pieces that you have to make. Each one of these wings is 2 pieces of the same piece, and then they're crocheted together, which makes a little bit less sewing, but it's still a lot of pieces. The arms are crocheted and sewn on, the antennas are crocheted and sewn on, and the head and the body again are 2 pieces that you sew together later, and it creates a little bit more bobbliness as well, that bobblehead effect happening, but I think I addressed it a little bit better here by stuffing the neck a little bit more firmly, but again, that could also be avoided if you were just to crochet the head to the body in one piece, like I was saying with the bat as well. So anyway, I think I would put this pattern in B tier. I know we're kind of starting off in a little bit mid territory, but this is mostly, like I was saying, because it's just a lot of pieces that you have to sew on, lots of time invested and yarn invested for the size of this project, in my opinion. The next pattern in the book is Belah the plush butterfly. This one is really similar in construction to that last pattern, the bee pattern. You see the same kind of like teardrop shape body and the same exact head construction. We have the same exact antennas, except there's some color changes. The only thing that's really different about this pattern is the wing construction. We have 4 separate pieces to the pair of wings, and then each one of these circles in the wings is 2-ply. So there's 2 circles to a wing and then 2 smaller circles to a wing, and you actually sew these 2 pieces together from what I remember, and then after that you crochet around each piece of the wing to get the finished wing and then sew it to the body, of course. So lots of sewing involved, lots of pieces involved again. This one also is supposed to have little arms that I'm just now realizing, and I forgot to create the arms. So think of that little bee back there, how he had those little tiny arms next to his neck. That is supposed to be here as well, but I am just now realizing that I forgot to make those, so that's yet another piece that you have to crochet and sew on as well. So lots of pieces. I think that for a butterfly, the wings are really plain, so I went ahead and got out some of my variated yarn. This is bloom yarn, and I used that for the inner piece of the wing because typically when I think of a butterfly, I think of like really intricate patterns on the insides of the wings, and this pattern just doesn't really have that, so that was kind of disappointing about this pattern. So for the tier list, I think I would either have to put this between B tier and C tier. It's mostly because it's a pretty plain pattern and it's almost like a variation of the bee pattern. I wouldn't really consider this its own pattern. We have a slightly different wing construction, but overall it's a almost identical pattern to the bee pattern, so I'm a little bummed out about that. When I'm picking up a pattern book and it says 18 patterns in it, I'm thinking 18 completely unique patterns. I had kind of the same note about Crochet by Jenna's mini amigurumi book. It just had a lot of the same like basic constructions for a lot of patterns with different color variations, but the color variations all had like their own individual pattern, and I don't think that's really fair to say that the pattern book had like additional patterns than just the individual ones with different variations. So I think I'm going to put this one in C tier. The next pattern in this book is Dottie the Dolphin, and I actually really like this. It's really adorable. It also sits up on its own. It doesn't really need any stabilization of any sort to keep it in like the perfect display state, so that is really awesome. I really also love how the big giant eyes that I put on this plushie, as well as the plushie in the book pictured, has these big beautiful safety eyes that really draw out a lot more character. If you were to put just like a plain black set of safety eyes on this, I think it wouldn't be as cute, but it would still be really cute as long as they're really big eyes, I think. This pattern didn't have as many things to sew on. Obviously, it's a single continuously worked body, and then all of the fins are separate. The back fin here is 2 pieces sewn together and then sewn to the tip of the tail. We have 3 more fins in addition to that, the dorsal fin as well as the side fins, and all of those are sewn on separately and not crocheted into the round or into the body itself. So kind of minimal sewing compared to the previous projects that I had mentioned. So this one gets a little bit funner for me to make overall. Having to sew on smaller pieces isn't as egregious, in my opinion, as sewing on much bigger pieces that need to be in the exact right place to make it look right. So I think for this one, Dottie the Dolphin, I think I would put in A tier. I really like this one. Maybe, I don't think I could put it in S tier just because There are some things I think could be done differently. I think the tail fin itself could be crocheted into one piece and then sewn on. I also think that there's opportunity for some of these pieces to just be crocheted directly into the body rather than being crocheted separately and sewn on. So that is why I would put it in A tier rather than S tier. So next up we have a pattern that had a color variation in it. So it is Dessa and Duffy the duck, and I really like this mallard. It's so cute. I have never seen a crocheted duck in like this orientation before with the big giant head, super endearing looking. I think it's a really unique looking pattern and it's really cute. I love the little tails that they have in the back and how the wings on the side look like they're just like flappable and cute. They look like they're like splashing in a little puddle or something like that. I really like that about this pattern. As you can see, as I flop them around, they're a little bit bobbly as well. I think the yellow one is a little bit more bobbly than the mallard. And again, that is just due to the head and body not being crocheted together in one piece. This one again has a bunch of pieces that you have to sew on. The beak is crocheted separately, head, body crocheted separately, each of the feet is crocheted separately, then you have each of the wings and a tail, and all of those pieces have to be sewn on. None of them are really crocheted into a round or anything like that, so it is quite a bit of sewing. However, I do think it's really cute, and I'm not sure how you would achieve the same sort of effect for some of these pieces. Some of these pieces I think could be crocheted into the round. So for example, for the beak, you could have that crocheted before you start the head, and then you could crochet through the folded part of the beak into that part of the round, and then you wouldn't have to worry about sewing that on. I also think the tail bit back here could just be achieved by putting some increases and maybe decreases in the correct location on that part of the body, and then you would have this tipped tail and you wouldn't have to worry about crocheting that and sewing it on as well and getting it like centered correctly. So those are some things I see about this pattern, as well as just obviously the same note that I've had about a few patterns now about the head and body could just be one continuous piece, and then you wouldn't have to worry about any sewing and any bobblehead issues like we're seeing here. I do really appreciate that even though this is a variation pattern, that they're included in the same pattern. So Dessa and Duffy are one single pattern, and there's just like a variation thing with different color changes. And I really appreciate that the duck isn't its own pattern and the mallard isn't its own pattern. It's just a color variation, because that would be another way to very cheaply add another pattern to the book without actually having to make any unique design. So I really appreciated that. So now for our tier list, I am again conflicted because I do really, really like how these ducks turn out looking like. They do take a decent amount of time to make. They're an hour and 2 minutes to make, but which is also kind of funny to look at side by side with my notes about Dottie the Dolphin, because Dottie the Dolphin takes 4 minutes more to make. So it's kind of surprising that this more intricate looking pattern takes less time to make than the dolphin does. It also only takes about 2 ounces of yarn to make, which is, in comparison, Dottie the Dolphin takes 1.6 ounces of yarn. So I am tempted to put it in A tier, but with all of the sewing and some of the things in the pattern possibly could have been done by just crocheting into the round or things like that, I think I might need to put it in. I don't know. It's hard. It's so hard. These ducks are so cute. I think I'm going to put it in A tier, because I could see myself using this pattern in the future to make more of these just because of how cute they are. I seriously think they're so adorable. And I also posted a preview of these little ducks to my Instagram prior to this video coming out, and I got a lot of compliments about them. So I'm sure that they will sell. So A tier is where I'm locking it in. The next pattern in the book is Dora the Dumbo Octopus. And guys, I am in love with this pattern. This was super easy to make. This was the fastest pattern to make in the book. least amount of materials from what I remember to make in the book as well. And it's no sew, which makes it really market prep friendly. This only took me 35 minutes to make, and it is really adorable. I've never seen a Dumbo octopus out there before, so it is really cool. And I think this is one of the patterns that I would probably market prep in the future, and I think it would sell really well, and I would be able to increase the price for the size and have people actually still want to buy it just because of the cute factor. And only taking 35 minutes to make, I could market prep a bunch of these in basically no time. So that is really awesome. So let's go ahead and put this one in S tier. We've got our first S tier of the video. I'm so happy about that. I was a little worried getting up to this point that every pattern was going to involve a ton of sewing, but this one surprised me. It was a very interesting construction, really unique construction. I hadn't seen a construction like this before. So what I'm talking about here is the body is crocheted in several pieces, but you don't have to worry about sewing any of the pieces together. So you crochet like this cup shape for the body, and then you crochet a round shape separately, and then you crochet the two together, and then you get this little skirt with all the tentacles just by crocheting those pieces together and continuing to crochet in the round after that. And the little I don't know, antenna? I don't know if that's correct. Maybe they're considered something else. They're considered ear fins in the book, so that's very interesting. But they're just crocheted directly into the round, so it makes me think that a lot of these patterns were patterns that Theresa must have came up with like earlier in her crochet pattern career, and then this one is probably one of the patterns that came later to make the process of crocheting it faster because of some of those no-sew techniques that I saw implemented in this pattern. So anyway, S tier. I was really surprised after that last pattern to have the fastest pattern in the book followed up by one of the longest patterns to make in the book, Eli the Elephant. This one obviously has a lot of individual parts involved. We've got each one of these little ears, we've got the trunk, the head, the body, the arms, the legs, and then there's a little tail in the back. All of those pieces are crocheted and sewn on separately. And obviously I sound like a broken record now, but I think that the head and the body could be crocheted into one piece, and then you wouldn't have like this bobblehead thing happening too, especially because the head is going to be heavier than the body no matter what you do, as long as you're stuffing it fully like I am here. And I also noticed that the way that I sewed the legs on this little elephant here aren't actually the way that you're supposed to sew them on according to the instructions. I corrected for that in the patterns that you will see later on in this video, but I just wanted to note that before anybody commented down below telling me that I sewed the legs on wrong. But because of that, he does want to flop over quite a bit. You have to kind of prop him up, but I think that's just because of the way that I sewed on the legs. It's not any pattern flaw itself. It's supposed to be able to sit up on its own, and it's also supposed to have legs that kind of like flop down like this when you stand him up, so that his legs don't just splay out like they currently do. I think I also stuffed them too much. So I noticed starting with this pattern that overall like the head shape that I noticed compared to my finished product looks overall different. Mine is looking more like a big fat potato, whereas hers looks more like a really nice rounded square. And I was just noticing plushie after plushie starting at this point that the head shape just wasn't really coming out to the way that it's supposed to be, and I wasn't sure if that was due to like hook size being different or yarn size being different. But from what I remember, the pattern calls for a 5mm crochet hook for every single plushie. She uses a number 6 super bulky weight yarn, but it doesn't specify which yarn she uses, and the safety eyes that she uses are 20mm for this plushie, and mine are only 25mm, so I don't think that accounts for the shape looking different. Mine is definitely looking wider overall than her shape, and I don't think it's an overstuffing issue, because I feel like it's still pretty squishy. Like there's still room in there. I could have stuffed it more. Um, so that's just something I wanted to note, but let's go ahead and get into the tier list. So for Eli the Elephant, I don't know. I might have to put him in B tier just because the overall head shape is just not looking right, and it's not due to my yarn size or hook size, so I'm not sure why that's happening. I also mentioned that I didn't overstuff, so I'm not sure why the head shape looks so different. So I think I'm going to lock in B tier. It is a cute pattern. I can see people really liking this finished product, but the finished product that she achieved is so much cuter than the one that I achieved, and I understand that I did some things differently. Like the legs are overstuffed. They're also sewn on in the wrong location. But there are a lot of little things that I'm noticing about the appearance that just make it look a little bit different overall from the finished product that she was able to achieve, and I'm not sure what happened. Following up Eli the Elephant, we have Gemma the Giraffe, which is a really adorable pattern. I really like the little eyelashes, but obviously we're having a broken neck type issue once again because I wasn't able to stuff the neck fully enough with the head to body construction. That is yet again something that's appearing and rearing its ugly head once more, because I believe that you could just make the head to body in one continuous piece and not have that issue, because you would be able to stuff the neck fully and not worry about any of the fiber fill escaping as you sew the neck hole closed. So that is something I want to make really clear, is that could be easily avoided, and it would also save a lot of time in constructing the pattern just because you wouldn't have to worry about sewing. But as you can see here, there are again a lot of pieces involved with this pattern. We've got the antlers, we've got the ears, the little muzzle here, we've got the arms, legs, and the tail. All of those pieces crocheted and sewn separately, as well as obviously the head and body sewn separate, crocheted and sewn separately. The head is really top heavy, which makes it really challenging for when you're constructing and sewing that head to the body, getting that correct so that you're not getting a bobble issue like you're seeing here. I do think that I sewed the legs and arms in the correct location this time, so you can see that she does sit on her legs, and then when you release her legs and hold her by her neck or her armpits like I am, her legs dangle, which is what is intended with the pattern, to have all these little pieces that are very interactable, which I really enjoy as well. So for Gemma, I think I like this pattern more than Eli the Elephant. I was still noticing some issues with the head being top heavy, that neck construction not providing a lot of support, but I still really like the appearance of this, and I think that's enough to bump it up to A tier. This pattern takes 2 hours and 4 minutes to make, so a little bit longer. It's mostly due to all of those individual pieces you have to make, as well as the yarn that was required to make this was 4.7 ounces of yarn, so nearly an entire skein of Premier Parfait Chunky to make this single giraffe here. But I could see myself making this in the future, and that is why I would put it in A tier. Next up, we have Florence the Frog, which is another really unique looking pattern. I've never seen a frog looking like this, at least one that I've encountered, but I like how you can see each one of the legs and they're not just like bobbles. I think that's really unique. It looks like it's primed and ready to like hop away from you, so that's really unique about this pattern. I did notice that it's possible that there's a typo in the instructions specifically for the back feet. It was written slip stitch in neck stitch, and I think that what was meant to be said was slip stitch in the same stitch, because the front feet and the back feet, they were different patterns, but the way that the toes are created was really similar, so I think one was right and one was incorrect, and I think it was the back feet had the typo in it. So that's something to note if you're wondering why that's not working for you there. I definitely didn't have enough stitches to do it the way that it was written for the back feet, but everything worked out for the front feet, so there was an issue somewhere, and I'm pretty sure it was where the slip stitch was supposed to be made. Another thing I like about this pattern is that Florence the Frog sits up on her own. You don't have to prop her up because she just does it on her own. That's really cool, and it makes it a very easy to display plushie, especially for markets and for if somebody wants to take it home. It's really important that you're able to just like not mess with it much if you are somebody who's not going to play with it constantly. So let's go ahead and look at our tier list and figure out where we're going to place this one. So for Florence the Frog, I'm thinking that I'm probably not going to make this again in the future, which automatically puts it at B tier or lower for me just because the construction, it just takes a little bit more time than I typically would invest in for a frog pattern. A lot of the frog patterns that I typically use for market prep, obviously this one wouldn't be like a quick market prep make, being over an hour to make, but a lot of the patterns that I typically use to bring to market are extremely popular as is, and I don't think adding another variation of a frog pattern would be very conducive to allowing those sales to continue to go up. So if somebody were to want to purchase this for me, it would have had to be somebody who really, really likes the appearance of this specific frog and not just because they like frogs in general, if that makes sense. Another thing I want to note is that since there's a typo in the pattern, I feel like I'm obligated to rate it lower because that can be something that somebody just doesn't understand is a typo if they were to encounter this pattern on their own and not think, oh, why am I getting messed up in this area? Why isn't there enough stitches to fix, like to put all the written stitches here? So with that all being said, I think I would put this pattern in C tier, unfortunately. It's just that typo really creates a little bit of an issue for me, and I also think that just having to sew on all the individual pieces is a little bit annoying as well. Not only are there a ton of pieces to sew on, we've got the each individual eye, we've got each of these little leg haunches back here, then the feet separately, and then we've got the little arm pieces up here, and these feet are separately, and they're different patterns for each of those pieces that I mentioned. That just makes a lot of different pieces that you have to sew on in the exact right location every single time that you make it to make sure it looks consistent, and that just makes it a lot less likely for me to pick up this pattern again in the future, and so that's why I rated it C tier. Next up we have Gloria the plush goldfish, and I actually love how this looks. It's so cute. I've never made a fish pattern before that I've actually liked the finished product and what it looks like, and it's actually funny because I posted this as a sneak peek to this video as well several days, if not over a week or so prior to this video coming out, and I've already got somebody who's claimed her and wants to purchase her from me tomorrow. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm going to have to make more in the future. I think the eye here really elevates it as well and gives her more personality, makes it look a little bit more real, like a real goldfish. And I also just love all the folds in her tail, all of like the little flicks of her side fins as well. It's just so cute and unique. And I could just see so many different colored goldfish catching other people's eyes. You can do variated shades, so many different options to choose from that would make these really unique and eye-catching, and I can see these doing pretty well at market as well. So all that being said, even though this is a pattern that requires some sewing, I think I would have to rate it S tier. It's a really cute pattern. I really like how it looks, and what more do I have to say than this one is already sold? And just having a picture out there, like nobody had to touch it in person. They thought it was that cute that they just bought it from me without actually seeing it in person. I think that's crazy. So yeah, that really has to put it in S tier. It's a really quick make, really adorable, and I I feel like I don't have to say much to be sold on having such a cute pattern as a goldfish pattern, a fish pattern in general. I don't typically like fish patterns. They're usually pretty plain. So this one really has my heart, and I'm really excited about this one being in S tier. Next up, we have a pattern that I was a tiny bit disappointed with because we had Dora the Dumbo Octopus obviously earlier in the video showing that Theresa knows how to make patterns where you just crochet directly into the body to make it no sew. And then you have this pattern where every single tentacle is sewn in. This is Jules the Jellyfish, and I was really disappointed to learn that every single one of these tentacles is crocheted separately and sewn on separately. That's a lot of tentacles. We've got 4 of the lightest color blue tentacles, we've got 4 of the darkest color blue tentacles, and then we've got 3 of the middle tone blue tentacles in the center. And although I really liked the layered effect of all of the different types of tentacles in there, all the different colored tentacles, I do think that it would save so much time if you were just to attach your yarn to the bottom of the jellyfish and just chain and do the work that way instead of crocheting separately and sewing each of those pieces on. It's kind of annoying that it was done like that. I also want to mention that it uses the same techniques as Dora the Dumbo Octopus for assembling the head and like the little frill here. We have a cup shape like I was talking about for Dora, and then we've got a circle on the bottom, and then you just crochet those two pieces together and create the frill. So it shows that she understands no-sew techniques to make it faster, but she still decided to make all of these tentacles separately and sew them on. Maybe Theresa really likes sewing, but as somebody who makes plushies for a living, it just is a little bit annoying to have to sew so many things on for each one of these plushies. This one in particular, knowing how easy it would be to just crochet them into the body. And I didn't take any shortcuts, guys. I timed this for what it is, for if you were to crochet each of the tentacles separately, and it took me an hour and 2 minutes. For similar patterns that I have in my catalog of patterns that I use frequently for market prep, I do have a jellyfish pattern that I use very frequently. It's one of my favorite patterns to use for market prep from 1 Cent Crochet. It's a free YouTube tutorial and it's completely no-sew, and it uses the techniques that I'm talking about of attaching your yarn to the bottom of the jellyfish and then crocheting into a chain and back up into the jellyfish itself, and it makes it so much faster to make and it makes it a lot more market preppable. This one is not as market preppable because it takes over an hour to make for almost a less desirable effect because the jellyfish head isn't like as big and like poofy as that one is. It's also got the frill is a little bit differently. If I were to make jellyfish in the future, I don't think I would use this pattern because of that. And if I were to use the pattern, I would probably just ignore her instructions for the tentacles in the first place and just crochet them into the body just so that it saves me some time overall. But I do like the idea of having like a bunch of different types of tentacles. I think that creates a really unique effect that I don't see with other jellyfish patterns, so I'll probably be borrowing that idea in the future when I work on different jellyfish, but definitely don't really see myself using this pattern again on its own because of how much time it takes to make and all the sewing involved. So it's pretty obvious how I feel about this pattern. I think I'm going to have to put it in C tier. I feel kind of strongly about it, and it's really hard for me not to put it in D tier just because of how close it was to being so good. But I did see some of those no-sew techniques being used that made it a little bit faster to make, and that's why I hesitate to put it in D tier. I know that it would be really easy for me to just do it the way that I want to do it and just use her instructions but in a different way and not have to sew them in. So that is why I'm going to put it in C tier. I think I'm going to save myself from putting it in D tier just because of that. It has some redeemable qualities, but I think it could be faster to make and easier overall to make as well if it was just no sew. which it can be. But anyway, I still think it's really cute. I still really like the tentacles. It does have some redeeming qualities that make up for the fact that it was just so close to being no-so, but I still think it needs to be put in C tier for that. Next up, we have Kai, the koala, and this one is really unique too compared to the pattern designer photos because I did this pale blue instead of just like boring gray just because I wanted some fun colors, and I've noticed that I like a lot when koalas are just like a blue shade instead of a gray shade. So that's why I did it like that. This pattern is really cool because there is options to add like Velcro to the legs and the arms, or magnets to the legs or arms so that they can just like stick together. She shows in some of the pictures in the book her like sliding her arm through those areas so that the koala is just like attached and she doesn't have to hold on to it at all. So I think those things are really cool about the pattern. However, again, this is another pattern that takes a lot of sewing. We've got the head and body separately, we've got the arms separately, legs separately. The ear has two pieces to each ear. We've got the outer ear, the blue part, and the inner ear, and then the muzzle itself is a separate piece as well. Something else that I notice when I look at the pattern photos versus my koala is that the ear piece itself, like the inner ear piece, looks like it's more defined around the edge of it than it looks here. I think it's possible that she missed out in her instructions, like working through like the front loops or the back loops only, maybe the back loops only, so those front loops would be exposed and create like a more outline effect around the ear, and I'm not getting that as much with my final product. So that is just something I wanted to quickly mention. I also noticed that in future patterns shown in this book where it's the same kind of ear design but still not getting like that outline that she's getting in her pattern photos. So this one is a cuter one. I think it is one that I will possibly make in the future. However, I do see some things just being a little annoying about it. That ear thing that I mentioned, as well as just like all of the crocheting and sewing on separately things. So I think I'm going to put this one in B. It's kind of mid for me. Don't know if I'll come back to this pattern in the future. I definitely have some koala patterns that I own already that I like more than this one, so that's why I would put it in B tier. Next up, we have Mason the Moose, and this pattern, in my opinion, looks a little different from the pattern photos. I was really not expecting the head to be this gigantic, guys. It is like almost all head, this moose, and it was not what I was expecting compared to the pattern photos. The head size compared to the body size in the pattern photos doesn't look nearly as astronomically different as it does when I've made it in person here, so I'm not sure if that's like a hook size, yarn size difference. Again, I'm using the same hook size, 5mm, with the same yarn size, number 6 super bulky weight yarn. So I'm not sure what's happening there. I also suspect that I'm using the exact same yarn as her. My colors are extremely similar. I'm using toffee for the horns, teddy bear for the body color, and then chocolate for the hooves. So I'm pretty sure I'm using the exact same yarn, exact same hook size. So I'm not sure if the hook size is different than what she's saying it is in the book or what, but I just thought that was interesting. This pattern again has a lot of sewing involved. Not only do we have head and body separate, which this one is more forgivable because the head is worked from here to the back, and that doesn't allow as much leniency as the rest of the patterns did, where the gap was like the same size as the gap left over from the head to the body. This one is more forgivable because it's just harder to do. You would have to crochet a circle into the head, kind of like you do with like the Mama Made mini patterns, the Lovey patterns. So that is more forgivable. However, the horns here are 3 separate pieces each. Each of these little humps here are its own piece, and then you have this whole section here that is its own piece. So you've got 6 pieces total for the horns, and you have to sew the little pieces to the bigger pieces, and then you take that one single piece that you have for each one of the horns and you have to sew them onto the head. Then you also have these ears to sew on. arms to sew on, legs to sew on, and a tail. So lots of pieces, and this one is probably a heavier one because of how giant the head is as well. So it's probably a good thing that the head shape isn't the same kind of construction as the rest of these patterns, because this one would not be able to hold its own weight. You would be having a much more severe bobblehead issue than we're seeing here. This one is wanting to lean its head forward quite a bit, but it's not as weird looking because that's kind of what it's meant to do, I think. He does also sit really well because of that weight dispersion there as well. So for Mason the Moose, I think I would put him, I'm split between A tier and B tier because I like what he looks like. I think how big his head is actually kind of cute, but it was really surprising. However, he does take a long time to make and a lot of yarn to make. It took nearly 5 ounces of yarn, so nearly an entire skein of yarn to make him, and it took 2 hours and 10 minutes to make, so again, a little bit more time than I typically invest in a project of this size. So, with all of that being said, I do think I'm going to make him in the future. So, I think I need to put him in A tier because of that. He is cute, he's really adorable. I am a little bummed out about the amount of sewing involved to make him, but he is really cute, really unique pattern. I haven't seen a moose pattern at all, if not like this before. I'm pretty sure I haven't seen a moose pattern before though, so that's really cool. It's starting to look behind me like some of the plushies are getting a little sleepy as I add more in the background. I'm just encountering that same like kind of bobblehead issue where I add another plushie and then one gets knocked over, and I'm just gonna leave it because that's just kind of the nature of this video, I think. But anyway, the next pattern I actually made 2 of because I wasn't super happy with what I had to do to make it look right the first time. And then another thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to test my theory about the hook size possibly being wrong in the books, because again, this pattern says it calls for a 5mm hook, number 6 super bulky weight yarn, and I was using both of those. So we've got Margo the Mouse, and this one here is the one I did in 4.5mm hook, and this one is 5mm hook. You're going to notice an immediate difference in the face shape because I was thrown off by the one that has the blue safety eyes when I finished the head shape because it looked so different from the photos. I'm not sure if it's because I was stuffing it weird, but I did some face shaping to try to fix it, and I think it just kind of looks more weird now, but I don't know. You can let me know in the comment section which one you think looks better. But I do think that this one here looks a little bit more like the face shape in the pattern itself. Something else I'm noticing about this is as I compare mine to the pattern photos, the eyes just look off on both of them. I don't know if the placement instructions are correct in the pattern or if I'm just doing it wrong every time. Not sure what that's about. Obviously, it's going to look different with face shaping, that the eye placement is going to look off because of that, but this one in particular, it still looks like they're too high compared to the photos that I'm seeing. I'm not sure if it's because I stuffed it too much, but it is stuffed lightly. As you can see, I'm squishing it very lightly and it's got lots of room in there to move. And this one, I think I stuffed a little bit more firmly, but that face shape, I feel, shouldn't be as off as it is when I compare the finished product that I get to the pattern photos. Margo the Mouse, I think I'm going to put in C tier, not only because of the face shape just like not looking right no matter what I do, but because of all the sewing involved with this pattern as well. We've got 2 different pieces of the ears, and again, that ear kind of looks different than what hers does in the pattern photos just because it looks like she's doing like back loop only crochet instead of going through both loops, and it's not mentioned in the pattern that you should work in one loop or the other or both. So I think that's something that's off as well. And I'm not really a huge fan of what this looks like either. It looks really cute in the book, but it's hard to get those ears positioned correctly. They also like to flop forward a lot, which is really different from what it looks like in the book. So that is why I put it in C tier. Next up, we have one of my favorite patterns from the book. This is Oslo the Owl. Isn't he so cute? I will admit I did run out of my main body color for the wings, so I had to do a little bit of improvising to kind of like blend the color to the wings, but I think it still looks really, really cute, so I'm really proud of that. But he is a really simple and unique owl pattern, and I'm really, really happy about that. The only things that you have to sew in this one are the beak and the eye patches, as well as like your little wings here. The feet are embroidered in, and the body is just one piece, and you crochet across the top after you're finished to get that cute little tufted ear shape up here to make the owl. And so because of all that, I think it's a really cute pattern, and it's pretty easy to make. One of the more forgivable patterns for having a little bit more sewing than you're expecting, just because it is really cute, and I'm not sure how else to achieve how cute this is without sewing. So that being said, I think I will put this one in S tier as well. It is one of my favorite patterns from the book, and I think just having it be one of my favorites should probably put it in S tier, not only because it's just showing my bias, but also because it shows how good the pattern is. I do not like patterns that have lots of sewing, but this one is more forgivable, obviously, because I already said it's not really easy to achieve some of these things without sewing, so that's why I kind of give it some grace, and I am putting it in S tier. I've got three more patterns left to show you guys before we get into like ranking of time and yarn amount used and just like my overall comments about the book. But next up we have Piper the Panda, which is another one that I will admit I did some face shaping because I finished it. The head shape wasn't looking like it was supposed to, and then I was like, what can I do to make it look a little bit better? And I did some face shaping. And this is just what it ended up looking like, unfortunately. Not very nice. It kind of looks a little goofy. But I did follow the instructions. I used the yarn weight that was suggested and the crochet hook that was suggested. So again, not sure why it's looking so much different. Like the head shape's looking so much different than hers. I'm not overstuffing. I know a lot of people are gonna say that I'm probably overstuffing, but it's not the case. Maybe it's possible that you are supposed to stuff like super firmly, and that's why I'm not getting it every time. Maybe that's the problem, but I don't think that that would be the problem. Um, but anyway, I again, this is another one of those patterns where there's lots of pieces. We've got these eye patches, the muzzle, the ears, arms, legs, the tail on the back, head, body, and the bamboo if you choose to make the bamboo. All of those pieces are crocheted separately. The bamboo actually surprised me a little because it was a little less sewing from what I remember. I don't think there was hardly any sewing at all. I think you might have had to create some leaves and sew them on, but that was really the only thing going on there that required sewing. Or maybe you had to like tack the leaves in place after you created them. But overall, still a lot of sewing, still a lot of pieces, still doesn't quite look right, and I'm not really sure why. Definitely let me know in the comment section if you guys encounter the same kind of issues, or if you think I'm like completely wrong and I'm doing something very obvious wrong, but um, I really don't know why the head shape is looking so much different for all of these like that look like this. And again, this is gonna be the last time I say it because I think, oh, no, it's not. There's one more pattern that has the same construction, but we've got the head and body, and it could totally just be one piece, and then you wouldn't have this bobblehead issue again, but that'll be the second to last time you hear that. So let's go ahead and look at the tier ranking I have for this. This one, this one is hard. Um, I feel like it had so much potential to be cute, but just so many issues here. And I don't know if it's me, but I always have issues with patterns where you have to have like eye patches too. It's hard to get them even, especially if the pattern is identical for both of the eye patches. That was something else that I noticed. It's hard to make those look symmetrical because it's an identical piece. And if you're going to make it look symmetrical, one is going to have to face wrong side out. So that's something else to note too. I guess that I didn't notice when I was making the pattern, but I'm noticing now is that those eye patches should have been two separate patterns so that the right side was facing out if you're sewing them on symmetrically. But yeah, definitely some of these appearance things are probably a skill issue with me not liking sewing so much and not really wanting to practice it a lot and being impatient and not wanting to put things exactly where they should go. At least I try. I try to put them exactly where they go, but somehow they still end up looking wrong sometimes. And this is one of those cases. Um, so I think I'm going to put this one in C tier. I think I need to give it some grace. I really want to put it in D tier just because of how much I don't like what this looks like and how far it escapes the expectations versus reality game, you know? But I feel like I need to give it some grace because it's very possible that I'm just doing something wrong and I just don't know what it is. So if you know what I'm doing wrong, let me know. But yeah, it's a C tier for me. Next up, we have Philo the Puppy. This one is really cute. I was surprised at how cute it looked when I was doing the assembly because when I finished making like the ears, I was just kind of thrown off at how they appear in the book photos and how they appear on mine, but I think they're just like meant to be really floppy and cute like this. Obviously, mine has some color changes that are not mentioned in the book, but I figured I'd just do some freestyling here since it was one of the last patterns in there and I wanted to make it look unique and cute if I could. So that is why I did that. This is one of the patterns in the book that also I'm not sure really what I'm doing wrong. The main thing that I'm noticing when I'm looking at the pattern photos and mine in person is that this muzzle is just looking way too long. That's something else I noticed about the panda is the muzzle just looks really long compared to what I'm seeing in the book. I didn't stuff it like too much, I don't think. Maybe it's a little bit too much stuffing. Maybe that's why it's just more pronounced and sticking out really, really far. Um, but that is just one of the things that I'm noticing. This one is another one that takes a lot of different pieces to crochet and sew on as well. We've got two ears, we've got a head, body, the muzzle, two front feet, two back feet, and then the tail. And then in addition to that, you've got the little collar here, which is two pieces. We've got a chain to go around the neck, which you then slip stitch shut to put around the neck. And then after that, you have the little bow, which is a rectangle, which surprised me. And then you kind of fold it in half and crochet or sew together, one of those two, to get this kind of 3D ribbon effect, which I really think is really unique and really cute. Haven't seen that kind of construction of a bow before, so I thought that was really cool. And then you kind of wrap your really long tail around the center of that to make the bow, and then sew it to the body itself. And it's not like sewn to the collar, so the collar's not removable. You also can't shift this bow with the collar. So that is also something that is up to you if you like that or not. If you want it to be more interactable and move the bow around, that's definitely up to your own opinion about that. But it is really cute, and I haven't really seen a puppy pattern that I like, but this is one of those patterns that I think is a little bit closer to being a pattern that I like for a puppy pattern. So for the tier ranking, I think I'm going to put it in B tier. I think there are a lot of things about this pattern that could be a little bit easier to make for like all the parts. We have the arm, the legs, the front legs, for example, they could just be crocheted into the round because they're sewn horizontally into a row instead of like perpendicularly to a row like these back legs are. I also think that the bow and collar could be somehow created in one piece and not have to worry about creating two separate pieces and sewing them on. And I also just think that the muzzle just looks wrong, and I'm not sure why, because I followed the instructions. So that's why I put it in B tier. Alright, the last pattern that we have in this video is Wilder the Whale, which is a pattern that is surprisingly big for what it is, and it's also surprisingly less yarn required to make it than I was expecting as well. He is a bigger project. He takes a little bit longer to make than I was expecting as well. He's also got a similar construction to the dolphin pattern, where you're creating each one of these fins separately, and you're also creating each one of the back fins separately. There's no dorsal fin, but he is a really cute little whale. He looks kind of like droopy and pouty, maybe like a little, I don't know, grumpy in a way. But yeah, I think he's really cute, and I could see myself making this pattern again. I don't really have anything negative to say about the pattern, other than obviously it's a little negative to me to have to sew things on, but I don't see how you could really achieve some of the things in this without doing some kind of complicated processes to crochet into the body. But I would place this pattern at A tier. I think I would make this one again. It's cute. I don't really have another whale pattern in my catalog of patterns. So I could see myself making this one again, probably for like a commission, or if this one sells at market and I have people asking about like more whales, maybe I would make a couple more and have them ready for market. But I would rank it A tier. Okay, so before we finish up the review for today, I wanted to go over some different lists that I've put together in my journal here about pricing, as well as the timed ranking and the materials ranking, as well as some averages about how much materials, specifically yarn, it takes to make all of these, as well as the average of how much time it takes to make all of these. So starting off with the pricing that I will use for markets. For Belah the Butterfly, the minimum price I can price that at for a market is $22. That one was a little bit of a longer make, being as small as a plushie it would be. So I had to upcharge it a little bit because of that time and the materials that it required to make it. So I'm pricing that one at $25. Then we have Binx the Bat. I'm also going to price that one $25. The minimum price that I can price it at is $24. So that one shows you that that one took more time than Belah the Butterfly, obviously, because that minimum price is higher. Probably also some additional materials that I didn't have to use as much of in the Belah the Butterfly pattern. Then for Burke the Bee, the minimum price for that one is $31. I will probably price it at $32. I don't know what it is about the 31 as a number, but that just is a little weird, and I don't want to price it too high compared to the other ones of similar sizes, so that's why I would only upcharge $1 from the minimum price. Then for Dessa and Duffy the ducks, the minimum price on that one is $17, but I think I would price those at $25. I think they look a lot more intricate than some of the other patterns that are a little bit higher priced and similar priced to that one. But I really think that people will value it higher than $25, possibly. So it's a good middle of the range there, where it is good value for that size of project. Next we have Dora the Dumbo Octopus. That one is minimum price of $11, but I'm going to price it at $15. I have some like no-sew jellyfish that are a similar size to that I price at $15, and I think it will do good at that price range, especially considering all of the other plushies I have priced at that price. They're all similar size to that Dumbo the Octopus pattern. Then I have Dottie the Dolphin at a minimum of $18, but I think I would price that one at $20. I think that's pretty fair for the size. Eli the Elephant was minimum of $32, so I think I would price Eli the Elephant for $35, just because most of the sitting and standing animals that I offer are around that size, and I typically price them at $30, $35 to $40, depending on how intricate or detailed the patterns are. So that one I think I would put at $35. Then I have Florence the Frog. Florence's minimum price and market price are the same for me. It was just a little bit high for a minimum price, so I didn't want to add anything to it. It's $16. That's a pretty small project for that price, but I think I have some things that are kind of similar to that price. Gemma the Giraffe was minimum priced at $33, but I'm going to price it at $35 with the same reasoning that I gave for Eli the Elephant. Lots of other things that are about that size in that price range as well. Then we have Gloria the Goldfish. Minimum price was $13 and I'm going to price it for $15. And I think that's a really good price for that. Very fair for what it is. You got really eye-catching safety eyes on Gloria the Goldfish, and I think that is going to do well at that price. Then we have Jules the Jellyfish. Minimum price and market price the same. Then we have Kai the Koala. The minimum price is $27, but I would price it at $30 with the same reasoning of just comparing prices of things I already have at that size and that kind of value. Then we have Margo the Mouse. I would price her at $25. Her minimum price is $23, so just rounding up that number a little just so that it's easier to make change for it. Mason the Moose was minimum of $33 and I'm going to price him at $35. Potentially may change my mind about that when I'm actually making the tags. I think he is a bigger plushie than the other ones that are at $35 just because of his head being so big. We've got those big antlers on him. It's a really unique plushie that I think might need to be $40 instead of $35. Then we've got Oslo the Owl. He is minimum price of $16, but I'm going to price him at $20. That's a little bit more of an upcharge than a lot of these other ones that I'm listing here, but I think he is a bigger plushie than a lot of the things that I have in like the $15-ish area in my inventory, and so that's why I would charge $20 instead of $15, and I think it would be really popular at that price as well at $20. Then we have Philo the Puppy, minimum price of $22, but I'm going to price it at $25. Piper the Panda, minimum price of $32, but I'm going to price it at $35. The thing with this one is I think normally if it came out looking more like what the pattern photos look like, I would have priced it at $40 just because of the extra little accessory with the bamboo shoot and everything, but because it just looks a little wonky in my opinion, I don't think people would want to buy it for $40, but $35 feels a little bit more reasonable for that one. And then finally we have Wilder the Whale. He is minimum price of $18 and I'm going to price him at $20, and I feel like that's really fair. I'm thinking that a lot of people will probably think that's a good deal for the size of that plushie, but it's a simpler pattern that you just kind of size up and down as needed. So that is why I'd price it at that. So with all of that pricing information thrown at you, let's go ahead and move on to the timed ranking. So for this, I wrote down the time in minutes for every single plushie because it was easier for me to like organize them that way when I was making the ranking list. And we're going to start from the lowest ranking, and a few of these were tied, so it's not going to come out to 18 individual ranking spots because of that. So at place number 17, we had 130 minutes for Mason the Moose. 16th place was 124 minutes, Gemma the Giraffe. 15th place was 122 minutes for Eli the Elephant. 14th place was 120 minutes for Piper the Panda. 13th place was 117 minutes for Burke the Bee. 12th place was 100 minutes for Kai the Koala. 11th place was 90 minutes for Binx the Bat. 10th place was 87 minutes for Philo the Puppy. 9th place was 84 minutes for Margo the Mouse. 8th place was 81 minutes for Belah the Butterfly. 7th place was 66 minutes for Dottie the Dolphin. 6th place was 64 minutes for Wilder the Whale. And then 5th place was a tie at 62 minutes for both Dessa and Duffy the Duck and Jules the Jellyfish pattern. Then in 4th place, we had 61 minutes for Florence the Frog. 3rd place, 60 minutes for Oslo the Owl. 2nd place was 46 minutes for Gloria the Goldfish. And at 1st place, we had 35 minutes for Dora the Dumbo Octopus. The average out of all of these being 84 minutes or 1 hour and 24 minutes to make. I do want to say really quickly that I know that this pattern book wasn't really advertised as being like a market prep friendly or like quick patterns or anything like that, but it is still a little worrying for me to see an average of that long and that much time to invest in a project. I know that a lot of these are kind of like bigger projects where you have like the animal's arms, legs, all of the appendages, as well as like ears, facial features, all those things, and that makes a lot of these designs more complicated to make. But I think adapting some of these patterns to have some more no-sew techniques in them would make them shorter to make overall and probably save a lot of people time and make the patterns more efficient to make overall. So now that I've covered that, let's go ahead and get into the materials ranking so you know how much each of these patterns take in yarn in ounces. 14th place, we have Mason the Moose again at 4.9 ounces of yarn. In 13th place was 4.7 ounces for Gemma the Giraffe. So far those rankings are exactly the same compared to my timed ranking. Gemma the Giraffe both takes the second most amount of time and the second most amount of yarn, and Mason the Moose takes the most amount of time and the most amount of yarn. So I just wanted to call that out for a second because I noticed that. And for 12th place, we have 4.3 ounces of yarn for Belah the Butterfly. And then in 11th place, we had a tie in 4.1 ounces of yarn for both Eli the Elephant and Piper the Panda. 10th place, we have 2.9 ounces of yarn for another tie, two patterns, Burke the Bee and Wilder the Whale. 9th place was 2.7 ounces of yarn for Philo the Puppy. 8th place, we had another tie, 2.6 ounces of yarn for both Binx the Bat and Kai the Koala. 7th place, we had 2.5 ounces of yarn for Oslo the Owl. 6th place was 2.4 ounces of yarn for Margo the Mouse. 5th place was 2.1 ounces of yarn for Dessa and Duffy the Duck. 4th place was 1.9 ounces of yarn for Jules the Jellyfish. 3rd place was 1.6 ounces of yarn for Dottie the Dolphin. Tied for 2nd place is 1.5 ounces of yarn between Florence the Frog and Dora the Dumbo Octopus. And then finally in 1st place we have 1.2 ounces of yarn for Gloria the Goldfish. So Gloria the Goldfish is pretty highly ranked in both of these lists, as well as Dora the Dumbo Octopus, also pretty highly ranked in the list. The average amount of yarn that you need for all of these projects is 2.6 ounces of yarn, so I feel like that is pretty typical for this size range of projects, so that isn't as concerning to me as the average for the time it takes to make all of these projects. So anyway, now that we finished all of that, I'm going to go ahead and talk about my overall thoughts about the pattern book altogether and all of the different patterns that it offers. So overall, I've already harped on this quite a bit when I was doing like the tier ranking list for every pattern, but a lot of these patterns could be a lot lower so. Specifically, there were a ton of patterns in here that had a head and body separate, where it could have just been one piece and gone continuously, and you would have eliminated some of the neck support issues that I was continuously having, as well as just making the patterns more efficient and easier to make all together. Something else I noticed about the book was, even though there were a lot of work in progress photos, which I always love when patterns have tons of work in progress photos, some of the work in progress photos had corresponding instructions on a separate page than where the photo was located, so you had to flip back and forth if you were confused and needing to reference that photo, and I wasn't a huge fan of that, specifically because I was noticing there was a lot of room on different pages where you could have just shifted things around to make it fit on the page that it should have been on. So that was just something that bothered me a little. I'm sure it might bother some other people, but it might not be as big of a deal for others as well. Finally, this is also something that I kind of noted when I was talking about individual patterns, but a lot of these patterns, the final photos in the book look slightly or significantly different in terms of like head shape, different pieces, how they were stuffed or maybe put together. Like I noted the ears looking like they were done like some back loop only stitches where the front loops were exposed and looking a little bit more crisp than they were in mine. So it makes me think that maybe some of the things weren't like proofed, or maybe there was revisions that happened to the pattern and then later they were made and the photos were updated, but the pattern wasn't. It also makes me think that something weird is off, maybe with the materials or the hook size, most likely being the hook size being the wrong size indicated. For every single one of these patterns, I think that the hook size indicated was 5mm hook, and the yarn size was number 6 super bulky weight yarn for everything, so that should have stayed consistent throughout. I was using the same hook and yarn size as the pattern writer did throughout the whole book, so I'm not sure why I was experiencing so much of a difference in what mine were turning out looking like compared to the photos. And I know that I also mentioned that it's possible that like the stuffing created the issue, but I don't feel like it should make such a huge difference when stuffing. I feel like the overall shape should just be consistent and shouldn't vary so much based on how much you stuff it or not. But anyway, I still enjoyed a lot of the patterns in this book. As you could see, I rated some of them very highly in S tier, which I feel like is pretty rare for me. I really rarely rate something like a true 5 stars in my free pattern review series. So it's really cool to see patterns in here that I will probably return to and use in the future, and can see people really enjoying at markets as well. But the main thing that I want to harp on here is that these aren't super market preppable, so maybe a lot of these patterns are made for like single one-off projects that you're not going to use for like creating a whole bunch of and selling at market. That's the main thing that I want to stress here. But I understand, and I know that a lot of people who crochet and do amigurumi don't just do markets. A lot of people make things for their children or for themselves, and I understand that market prep isn't the main reason that a lot of people are looking for different new patterns to try out. So anyway, it is something that I felt was worth mentioning, but I know that there is that caveat of that doesn't really apply to everybody, so just take that with a grain of salt. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. It took quite a bit of time to put this all together, to crochet everything, write out pretty detailed thoughts about what I noticed about all of the different patterns, as well as just trying to come up with creative ways to kind of showcase what each of these patterns offer and the different pros and cons about each individual pattern, so that you can know if it is worth your time to get this book for yourself. But I do think it's a really well-made book. I only ran into one possible typo in it. There was just lots of beautiful work in progress photos, really clear instructions. And I especially really liked all of the title pages having their own like little page where it tells you what materials were used and like what abbreviations you might need to know or techniques you might need to know, and where to find them in the book if you don't know what they mean. So I thought this was a really fun project to do. I'm looking forward to doing more book reviews for you guys in the future, and if you see one come out and you want to see me review it in the future, definitely let me know in the comments section. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I will see you next week. Bye!